Hey Mike, do you know the difference between socialism and fascism?
No, what's the difference?
Well, socialism is when the government co-ops private corporations, creating an unholy union between the political and economic elite, giving the government a economic incentive to pass unjust laws and exploit the population. Fascism is when the private corporations co-opt the government, creating the same unholy unions and the same economic incentives to pass the same unjust laws to exploit the population. Socialists have gulags. Fascists have concentration camps.
Dynamite Mike, podcast that you like.
So for me, it's not about left or right. It's about right and wrong. And that's why I really focus on in my political career and in my life personally and professionally. So I wanted to thank you for inviting me here into
Yeah,
your
thanks
home
for
today.
coming on. Yeah, everyone. We got Joseph Ghodsee. He is a phenomenal guy here in Spokane Valley, a pillar, salt of the earth man. He is on the homelessness task force committee.
Yes, sir.
And he helps out with that. So he's got all sorts of really cool things, and we're going to cover a lot of great conversations and topics in depth and what's new. So take it away.
All right. Well, you mentioned that I was on the homelessness task force.
Yep.
I used to be a homeless veteran. I've actually been homeless twice.
Damn.
Let's see here.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your support, Mike. I believe you're a veteran as well, right?
Yep. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yep.
Yeah, so you were a veteran as well. What
Yep.
branch were you in?
The Marine Corps.
Oh,
Yep.
nice. Sorry for the way that they treat you guys.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah, I asked for it.
I know
And
you
again,
did.
And again and again.
They all do. They all do. I always like to. I'm Senior Vice Commander of the Disabled American Veterans, DAV, Chapter 6, Spokane Valley. I actually was doing that this morning. I got up at 9 a.m. or arrived at 9 a.m. and started working since then. It's been a long day. I've met a lot of Marine Corps personnel, helped out a lot with directing them in the right way to file for disabilities, things like that. And are you familiar with how you train fighting dogs?
I know that they go through a lot of abuse and they're isolated and, yeah, it takes a lot of abuse.
Yeah. What you do is you keep the dog in the cage, you open the cage, you kick the dog, you close the cage again. You repeat that over and over and over again. If that's starting to sound like how you treat the Marines, you might be right. So what happens is that eventually the dog becomes so angry and so used to whenever that cage door opens, it means danger, it means it's a threat. So as soon as you open that cage door, dog bolts out and kills whatever in front of it. And that's how you make a fighting dog. It's also how you make a devil dog. It's how you make a Marine.
Damn.
Yeah.
Isn't that the truth? It's a lot of psychological abuse.
Yeah, it's why I usually advise my friends and family to join the Air Force if they're going to join. But I do deeply appreciate the amazing feats of violence that the Marines are capable of and have done to protect our nation and freedoms. The invaluable work that all of them did in the Pacific Theater. I don't know if I could have done that.
Yeah, that would be tough. In fact, that old man vet, I do a lot of funny skits with him. Like, yeah, just of his crazy stories, which a lot of they're just made up, but they aren't.
Yes.
I mean, I'm literally taking them from other veterans and just telling the story through him.
I absolutely understand that. I have more friends over the age of 75 than under. So one of the most common stories I hear is how the randomness of war and the luck of who survives and who didn't. Like, there was one story, heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. Sorry for bumping it. Gentleman and his friend sign up. Both get sent to Nam. 2 foxholes in front of them. they're coming under fire, and they have to dive in. One dives into the foxhole on the left, another one dives into the foxhole on the right. A grenade was in one of them. The gentleman I was speaking to was the one that survived. The other one didn't. That randomness of war, that just luck of who lives and who dies. So often I hear young men going into the military saying, "Oh yes, I'm a good fighter. I can survive." Don't matter how fast you are, how strong you are. Doesn't matter. You're under fire. You dive in that foxhole. You don't know if there's going to be a grenade or not. And I'm a big fan of informed consent. I've helped a lot of people join the military, directed them to the resources to be able to get involved. But I usually like to warn them and tell them those stories because, quite frankly, I don't think enough people know.
Yeah, well, shit, my grandfather, both of my grandfathers were in the Air Force. They didn't serve in war. They had brothers that served in World War II. But I remember my grandpa and my uncles, like damn near at tears, trying to prevent me from going and joining the Marines. and then like years later, I mean, yeah, I'm lucky. I'm a lucky dude.
Yep.
A real lucky and blessed, but some people aren't, and then they get out of the military, and then they get homeless. You know.
Yes.
And I feel you, because I was homeless too. For like when I first got out of the Marines, I bought a house, got divorced. Lived in my vehicle for a solid year while going to school at Gonzaga. And it wasn't until like 2 weeks into it where I'm like, I want to take a shower. This sucks. Where can I take a shower? Oh, the gym at the university. And then I started getting back into the gym and working out again. And then I got myself out of homelessness. But one of the things I liked about living in my vehicle was the freedom of it. You know, just the freedom, the intoxicating freedom.
I absolutely understand that. My experience with homelessness was very, very different. I'm not going to go into it. It's quite a long story.
Yeah, no worries.
Briefly, I was active duty while I was homeless. I tried to get out through the military. It was approved. And then they took a look at my medical records after my family already moved back to Idaho while I was stationed in Alaska. They looked at my medical records, deemed me not fit to transfer services, report back to active duty. So I had to make a choice. Either I'm homeless or my wife and newborn daughter are homeless. Well, easy choice, very, very difficult consequences. I was homeless for about 3 months while I was active duty before they got me back into the dorms. They finally found the proper paperwork to file to get me back in, but by then I was in screaming, excruciating chronic pain. Still have it, in fact. And I just don't think they knew what to do with me. I don't think I knew what to do with myself. Go to work 12 hours a day, go sleep in my car. That did not help I have 2 bulging discs, I have arthritis, I have 2 bad knees.
Yeah, sleeping in a car sucks.
Yes.
I was fortunate I had an SUV. I was like high class.
I'm happy for you.
Yeah.
I had all my stuff in the back of my SUV. I had a 2005 Nissan Xterra at the time, and I couldn't stretch my legs out.
Yeah.
But it just aggravated all of my conditions. They all got worse, and I eventually got medically retired and became an expert, not certified, but an expert in filing for disability, VA disability, the benefits, and I've tried to put those works to use helping my fellow veterans. Would you like to know one of the most disturbing things I learned inside of my bout with homelessness?
Sure.
All right, so a little bit of context. I'm a former child laborer, got my first paying job at the age of 12. By the age of 14, I was studying to become a machinist, welder, and CAD designer. By the age of 17, I was the youngest millwright working at Idaho Forest Group. I would regularly operate heavy machinery, whether it was legal or not, and OSHA approved, was left up to interpretation, we can say. But I was working that hard, and every dime I made, 50% of it would go into savings. I worked my entire life to try and save for a home. But every $1,000 I saved, price of a home went up by 10 or more.
It's like chasing a ball down a hill.
Yes, it was excruciatingly painful. So I joined the military to try to, I heard about the VA home loans, and I wanted to achieve stability for my family. I heard about the consistent pay, the good benefits, the access to a home loan. So I decided to pull the trigger. It was a good decision looking back. I didn't go in the right job, but beggars can't be choosers. Well, then I ended up homeless once again, and well active duty, working constantly. So I just decided to put that big brain of mine to work. I graduated at 14 from my from my homeschool program, basically self-taught since the age of 8. Completed all the Idaho requirements by the age of 14, and that's why I was able to go to K-Tech, Kootenai Technical Education Campus. That's where I became a certified machinist and CAD designer and learned welding and IT. Well, I started studying the American housing economy, and I learned something interesting. Stick-built homes were a temporary solution by our founding fathers. See, at the time, stick-built homes were illegal. Over in Europe, homes were built by brick and mortar and were designed to last centuries. It'll be hard pressed to find a home that's lasted centuries here in America. But we were having a massive influx of European immigrants, and our founding fathers said, okay, we need to establish a temporary solution to solve our temporary housing crisis. We have all this lumber. It should be illegal, but we're going to make it a temporary solution. We're going to allow for stick-built homes. It's an abundant resource, it's renewable, and we can just build more until we can start building more permanent housing for our citizens. Well, I have a saying. Nothing is more permanent than a temporary solution that works. Well, of course, it was a temporary solution that works. We got a good lumber business going. As a former millwright at a lumber mill, I know it very well. I know the supply chain. I used to do landscaping, limbing, bucking, transportation, all the way to the fixing of the lumber mill equipment. But that didn't answer my question. If we allow for stick-built homes in America, why are the prices continuously going up? Why are they so high? So I kept digging. I started running controlled studies, interviewing different nations around the world. Deutschland, housing crisis. Denmark, housing crisis. England, housing crisis. Why? Why are Australia, New Zealand, housing crisis after housing crisis? Even nations with massive amount of vacant homes were having insane prices for homes. Japan, let's look at Japan. Japan stick-built homes, residential homes, go for about $10,000 if they aren't brand new. They're a depreciating asset over there. Depreciating means the value goes down over time. But here in America, and that would track with a stick-built home, which has a lifespan of 100, 200 years if you take care of it very, very well. But why are our prices for stick-built homes going up over time? That just doesn't make economic sense. Supply is high. demand has remained relatively consistent. What the heck is going on? So I did a little bit more digging. That clue that I got earlier, even nations with high amounts of vacant homes were still suffering a housing crisis. I want you to guess, just throw out a wild number. How many vacant homes do you think we have here in America as of 2025?
Millions. They're more than there are homeless.
You are right. Can you put out a number?
I don't. Maybe 50,000 times 50.
So we have 15 million vacant homes in America right now. Washington has one of the lowest vacant home rates, but all the people who can't get homes in all the other states come here driving our prices up. 15 million. Okay, well, maybe it's just that demand is high and we have a massive amount of homeless individuals. Guess how many homeless individuals was in the last point in time count? On the high estimation.
Ooh, in Spokane.
No, just nationwide.
Probably like 5 million. I don't know. Maybe less, maybe more.
That's a good guess. The point in time count estimated 700,000 on the high end. I like to say 800,000. But that still means that we have 15 vacant homes for every homeless person in America. 15. Now, why would that be? So I continued my studies. I decided to speak to a mortgage expert, a loan collections expert, and a investing expert. And they all provided a unique perspective, but only by combining the three of them could I actually begin to truly understand what was causing the problem here in America. So this is the synthesized version. Back in the 1950s, the banks wanted to make money, as banks do. I don't blame them for that. I'm a lover of capitalism. Well, banks wanted to make money, but thing is, supply was high, and demand was remaining the same. So they weren't able to give out a lot of mortgages. Well, what they decided to do was they targeted a new class of individuals that were coming out. World War II veterans. Military veterans in general. With their access to affordable loans, they were able to not just buy one home, but multiple. They could become landlords. So one person with a steady, consistent income was able to purchase and obtain multiple homes to rent them out. Well, that means one person can now buy 5 homes. That's the demand going up, which drives the price up. Supply and demand. Demand goes up, price goes up. Supply goes down, price goes up. Things like that. But supply goes up, price goes down. It's simple Econ 101. Well, more people taking out loans drove the price up, which meant that newer people who weren't veterans had to take out mortgages just to be able to afford a home. Well, those people who didn't have the consistent income and they weren't rental properties to be able to cover the cost of the mortgage, then some, well, they didn't have the economic stability. Every time there was a downturn, every time that they lost their job or missed a payment, their house was foreclosed upon. They lost their home. Heartbreaking. But not quite enough to cause a nationwide tragedy, a nationwide housing crisis. No, that requires more. Here's the insidious part. Well, they noticed by reducing the supply, while the demand goes up, they could drive up the price exponentially. So they reclassified stick-built homes from depreciating assets to appreciating assets. They appreciate in value over time. The value goes up. Well, in order to maintain that value going up, it means they would continuously have to reduce the supply because the demand wasn't going anywhere. Demand's just going to remain very similar or the same. So what they did was, by considering stick-built homes as an appreciating asset, it meant that they could foreclose on them and keep them on the books for an indefinite amount of time, considering them an appreciating asset, meaning that the price goes up over time, their books look better, the stocks sell at a higher price, and the CEO gets a big bonus. But that's not the only vicious cycle inside of this design. So the stock price goes up because the appreciating assets are going up, but also price is going up, which means more people need to take out loans in order to afford a home, which means more people are defaulting on their loans. More homes are being foreclosed upon. Banks are taking control of more appreciating assets. The price goes up more. More people need to take out loans. More homes get foreclosed upon. You see the cycle? It became a vicious cycle of debt, foreclosure, and sitting on the asset to make sure that the price continuously goes up. And guess who foots the bill for everything?
The renter and the taxpayer at some point, and
the American people. I don't think that it was designed this way. I don't think most people in the banking industry even know what's going on. They just see the number going up and know not to change it. And this is why I'm so focused on trying to establish boundaries within our economic structure. Because without boundaries, without rules, things can go sideways fast. And that's just one example of it. Look at the 2008 housing crisis. The amount of vacant homes we had at that time was 14.7 million vacant homes. The housing crisis, the housing crash of '08, was because the banks were overloaning and those loans were defaulting. So they had to sell off their massive backlog of homes, of foreclosures, in order to cover their losses. And instead of the U.S. government, who realized, oh, this housing crash is caused by a monopoly of the residential housing, because that's what this is. This is the banks monopolizing residential homes in order to increase profits. Instead of recognizing and using the Sherman Antitrust Act to crush the monopoly of American housing and make sure that it doesn't continuously affect us, no, instead we decided to bail out the banks. We decided to give them even more of the American taxpayers' money to ensure that they could continue to exploit us and continue to, continue the cycle of homeless or of housing monopolistic practices that they had. Why? It's because they were the largest donors. The bankers were buying and selling politicians. Remember how earlier I gave that definition of fascism, where fascism is the private industry co-opting government, creating an unholy union and economic incentives to pass unjust laws and exploit the population? Well, that's what they were doing. They were buying and selling our politicians in order to drive up the price of housing for every single American. Well, shoot, that doesn't sound like left or right. I've seen Democrats and Republicans support bailing out the banks. I've seen Democrats and Republicans taking massive amounts of corporate money. That's not left or right. That's right and wrong. Well, if there's structures so large that exploit Americans to such an extent that they can cause a nationwide housing crisis that isn't being solved, what other systematic problems are afflicting this nation? I guess I'm going to have to do more research. Now, let me ask you a question, and the viewers at home. When was the last time that you admitted you were wrong? Genuinely admitted you were wrong, changed your mind, and did research as to why you were wrong to ensure that you wouldn't be wrong on that topic again?
For me, it's at least once a year.
Nice.
Yeah, there's at least one topic a year that I love those profound moments. I like not being stupid. I think it's our obligation to make ourselves as unignorant as we possibly can.
I completely agree. That's an excellent point of view. For me, I grew up isolated. Child laborer, homeschooled. My parents were severely far right. Like, think far right and then go even further. I was raised with a whole host of racist, sexist, bigoted beliefs. I was a very offensive child. I was also, but there's a lot going on back there. Anyway, in order to try to fit into civilized society, I was taking etiquette classes.
Good for you. Shit, I should take some of those. I suck at etiquette.
I can send you some videos later if you would like. One of the best pieces of advice I ever received, I don't even remember who it was from. A true gentleman works to never offend another person. And in the event that they do offend them, apologize, learn why, and the highest class of gentlemen will learn even more about that person, history and culture and reasons behind why they were offended, so that you could actually impress them the next time that you met them, to ensure you wouldn't offend them again and they would actually like you. Well, as you could imagine, by a extremely offensive young man, I offended a lot of people.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah, I'm just glad I didn't use social media at the time, because a lot of that would be haunting me to this day. But I kept learning. My most common catchphrase is, "I'm sorry. Please teach me why I was wrong. Please teach me why that offended you." And I did that. Shoot, I think at this point I'd probably say that about once a week.
Damn.
Yeah.
Good for you.
I'm wrong.
You're pretty offensive.
Well, it's because I'm wrong a lot. I've taken to not just apologizing for when I am offensive, but also when I'm just incorrect, right? Mm-hmm. Because I don't want to be sharing misinformation. Everything I say, I try to have a whole host of sources to back it up. And if you want, I can provide them to you, especially regarding the housing crisis. Anyway. Well, one of the next things I learned about, you want to talk about how we have 1.9 million slaves in America?
Sure.
All right.
I would think it would be more than that.
Well,
depending on your definition of slave and what spectrum of slave they're on.
These are official slaves, not sex slaves, not those that are suffering from human trafficking. I'm talking about legal slaves in the U.S., legally owned and used for forced labor.
Like prisoners?
Ding. 13th Amendment. Hitherforward in these United States, slavery shall be abolished, except as a punishment for a crime of which the person is duly convicted thereof. That exceptions clause is what it's called. Causes so many underlying factors in American society that I can attempt to list them. But remember how I said economic incentives to exploit the population? Almost 60% of American prisoners who are locked away for years or decades are nonviolent. They aren't threats to society. They aren't threats to themselves. They could be otherwise productive members of society. But instead, we foot the bill. We, the American taxpayer, foot the bill to keep those nonviolent individuals in prison so that the prisons can use their labor to get rich.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
They pay them like 25 cents an hour or whatever.
Yes, 90% of women's underwear are made in prison systems.
Yeah, and they stamp the license plates
and also make office chairs. I believe it was 75% of office chairs last time I checked were made in prison. And then there's also chain gangs where they rent prisoners out to work in factories. Wait, wasn't that what the Nazis did with the Jewish population? They would rent out their prisoners.
Yeah, there's a whole movie called Schindler's List.
Yes. Wait, but that's fascism. Oh, right. That's the entire point of this talk. America suffers from both socialism and fascism at the same time. We have private prisons and socialized prisons, but both of them, by goodness, exploit their prisoners and exploit the American people in the process. So, let's see here. You have an economic incentive to keep people in prison so that they continue to make underwear for you so you can continue to sell it and make money. What type of society would you build in order to achieve that goal of keeping people in prison?
You would create a society where a small subset of the manufacturing is done locally. That would be one benefit, I guess. But really, I get it, punching the state license plates.
Mm-hmm.
But there is there could be a lot of exploitation of prisoners.
Yes, well...
Yeah, there's a lot of fuckery, even down with like subsidies.
Mm-hmm.
And the prisons and what they order and how... Yeah, there's a lot of fuckery that goes on.
Yeah, well, let me just give you a quick example. Not answering the question I just asked, but about what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Private prisons oftentimes have contracts with local districts, municipalities, and states that they are required to provide a certain number of prisoners. And if the prison population ever dips below a certain amount, they can sue that city, state, municipality for millions of dollars. Which means that judges are forced to convict and provide longer sentences to people who should not be in prison in the first place. But how would you build a system where you could put people in prison who should not be there in the first place? You would pass unjust laws to exploit the population. Marijuana, for example. Marijuana has made the private prison industry billions.
Oh, especially in Idaho.
Oh, yes, absolutely. The amount of innocent men and women who are sent to prisons to be used for slave labor because they had some marijuana in their pocket is absolutely insane. Astounding. That level of injustice would be enough to drive any true red-blooded American absolutely insane, seeing their fellow brothers and sisters suffering under oppression. We fought an entire Revolutionary War because we didn't like that our tea was being taxed. Yet here we are, accepting that some of our brothers and sisters are being thrown into prison, unjustly I might add, to be used as slave labor. That drove me absolutely insane. I swear to you, when I learned this information, when I learned this stuff about the housing, I got angry. When I learned the stuff about the prisons, I darn near lost my mind. I shut down for almost a year, recognizing the scope, because I just began studying the depths of how far such an exception in our Constitution, in our freedoms in America could reach. If I were to build an entire society centered around sending people to prison and utilizing them for slave labor, it would look a lot like the American society. Take away as many benefits as possible. Don't provide hospital care. No, you either work or you die. Well, then you must, if you cannot work, you have low education, you must turn to crime in order to survive. And then you get picked up as slave. Ooh, that one's a wild one. Okay, what else? You would build a system around providing poor education to the people you intend to turn into slaves. Are you familiar with redlining is? Redlining was a practice back in the 1940s to about the 1990s where you and I owned the exact same home on opposite sides of the street. But on your side of the street, you have one black person in your neighborhood, and I have none. Your house would be worth 20 to 30% less than mine, which means that you have every economic incentive to move out of that neighborhood into a white neighborhood so that you could build value with your stick-built home. It was a practice done by the banks and certain government and municipalities. Spokane Valley also had redlining. You can see that at the Spokane Valley Museum. Well, that's interesting. Now minority neighborhoods are designed to have lower priced homes, lower valued homes. Okay, interesting. It means that they have less access to capital, less access to loans, less access to credit. But, it's not a big deal until you recognize where you get school funding from. Vast majority of school funding comes from housing taxes in the district. It's not statewide. If it was statewide, all the schools would have the same amount of funding and all the children would have the same access to education. But we didn't. No, we have neighborhood taxes to fund the schools. So what about those minority neighborhoods where the children don't have access to education? Their schools are run down. They feel dirty. They're decades old. Right now, the Central Valley School District can't even afford, they won't even approve the bond. How many of those children who's going to school with mold above their heads and without AC are going to get angry? Angry at a system that ignored them. Angry at a system who does not care for them as human beings, does not value their intellectual capacity or the value they can bring to society. If you're told from the age of 12 onward that you are worthless and you are treated as worthless, guess what? You're going to act worthless. You might start to act up. This is called the school to prison pipeline. You can look it up later if you're interested. But what happened is they started positioning through the DARE program. It's a long story. It involves a lot of different organizations. But they started
DARE.
Yeah, you remember DARE.
Yeah.
They started positioning police officers in public schools. That used to never be a thing. Then what happened is all the children who would act up, instead of getting a talking to from the principal, got a talking to from the police, building a rap sheet, so that eventually they're getting treated as a criminal in and out of juvie. And then, as soon as they turn 18, boop, right into prison. It could be called the prison to slave pipeline, or the school to slave pipeline, because that's what happens when you underfund schools. That's what happens when you treat human beings with such little dignity. And that's the problem. When the government and the people in government have an economic incentive to pass unjust laws and exploit the population, how many of those run-on effects can truly happen? I have studied this for about 3 years now, and I haven't found the full extent of what is affected by the exceptions clause in our Constitution. I truly cannot fathom just how much injustice is being done to the American people, my fellow citizens, because of the exceptions clause in the Constitution. I try to talk to people about it, but it requires such nuanced detail about the way our government is structured, the way our criminal justice system is structured, the way our education system is structured, taxation, representation. All of this goes into a discussion such as this. I can't just cover it in a 2-minute blurb. That's why I kind of like this podcast idea and why I accepted your invitation. Yeah. Like, how can you sit still with such knowledge? I call it the curse of knowledge. I have immense chronic pain. I want to lay down and never move again. But how many other people have the option to do that? I'm a disabled veteran. I could just lay down and not be involved. But if I know what's wrong, how could I not be involved to make things right? So I started getting involved, and I've been trying to make things right. I'm trying to raise awareness, but I feel like a constant outsider. Like, you're with the Republican Party here locally, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The Republican Party is near and dear to my heart. I grew up Tea Party conservative, if not further right than the Tea Party. But then I moved closer to Reagan Republican over the years in the military. And I kind of stopped there, gotta be honest. So, conservatives in the Democratic Party get along with me really well. We get along great. For those who are uninitiated, I am an elected Democratic representative. It's for a water district, very small time. But I use my knowledge to try to make things better there. I have a degree in political science, a degree in criminal justice, and I'm studying operations and supply chain management. I've taken, as part of when I said earlier, I was homeschooled and self-taught. As part of my self-teaching, I got bored. Very bored. I completed all of Algebra 2 in a month. I tested clean out of it. It was the Saxon Math Algebra 2.
Good for you. I've always kind of struggled with algebra.
Oh, that's okay.
Once you get past algebra, though.
Yeah, it gets a lot easier. Yeah. The geometry I got out in, I think it was like 3 weeks. It was fun. It was just logic chains. But I continued learning also. I took chemistry from Cambridge in England, because through the internet. I took economics through Sydney University. I believe it was University of Sydney. I took some law from Harvard. I just have a strange eclectic amount of knowledge from all over. A little bit of here, a little bit of there. I'm not really an expert in anything except for supply chains because, well, I worked so many supply chains from the ground up. I was logistics in the Air Force. It's what I eat, sleep, live, and breathe. But I truly believe that when you understand the supply chains, you understand the world. My degree in political science and criminal justice directly tie into my degree, what I'm pursuing in supply chains. I have to understand the national and international trade. I have to understand trade agreements. I have to understand the economic policies of every single nation that I intend to do business with, on basically the entire planet. I have to understand their cultural models, economic models, history, common etiquette in order to communicate with them. That is my specialty, is understanding the world and thinking at that scale. And only because I have that strange eclectic amount of knowledge am I able to recognize the full, even partial of the effects of the housing crisis, of the exceptions clause. I don't know if there's anyone else who has the unique perspective that I provide. And that scares me. Because, by goodness, I just want to sit down and do nothing. But hey, I'm here. I'm talking. I'm trying to get things done. Do you have any questions for me?
Well, you covered a lot.
Sorry,
That's
I'm a
fine.
certified yapper.
That's fine. No, that's great. And you're a good storyteller, too, which is phenomenal. This is good. This is a good podcast already. Because believe me, I've had some guests where it's like trying to pull teeth. Man, and it's tough. But let's go back to the first thing you talked about, the housing crisis. I think some things I can add to that, observations I've seen. So a lot of these baby boomers are the largest homeowners, number of homes owned. So once they die off, that'll definitely increase the supply. And then how are you going to maintain that demand? And so eventually there's going to have to be a drop in the price. That's my forecast. That might not be what happens, though.
That's the forecast that my father had for the past 20 years. That's the forecast that I kept having told to me. But I'm a homeowner now. And even still, so here's the insidious part about the stick-built appreciation scheme. Those who are homeowners have every economic incentive to keep the scheme going. But I remember the pain that I suffered for decades trying to save for a home. I have every economic incentive to leave the system as is and continue to have my house appreciate. 20 years, I'll be able to send my daughter to college for nothing more than less than an eighth of the value of my home. But where is the honor in that? If I know a problem and I deliberately ignore it, isn't that sin? Malice, for me, I never assign malice where incompetence is just as likely. Vast majority of people are incompetent. And incompetence isn't bad. I was incompetent on the exceptions clause and all the rundown effects of it. I was incompetent on the cause of the housing crisis. So when I say incompetent, I don't mean it as a derogatory insult to anyone. But malice, on the other hand, I absolutely consider evil. Malice is you have the knowledge of what you're doing is bad. You have the foresight of what you're doing is bad. You know that the action or the consequence is bad. So that means that you have to have foresight. You have to have cognitive ability. And you have to know what's going on. So if you know the action and the consequence is bad, and you do it anyway, consciously knowing your decision is bad, that's malice. Right? Yeah, I used to be studying to be a seminarian. I was studying to be a pastor. Read the Bible cover to cover, King James Version, 3 times. Listened to it on audiobook over 70 times. People have told me I have a very biblical consideration of malice, which is a fair assessment. When I think about if I could just shut up about the housing crisis and let my house appreciate, that would be malice through an action. Right? Because I know that it's hurting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of other people in America. And if I just stay silent on it when I know what's wrong, that's malice on my point. Most people don't know what it is. Most people don't know the problem. Anyway, I'm sorry. What was your question?
Well, it was just observations and my forecast, how I thought the baby boomers die off, that would increase supply.
No, because most of the baby boomers, what they do before they die is they take out home loans to live more luxuriously inside of their final years, in their golden years, or to pay for medical debt. Medical debt's coming back. Don't worry, we'll talk about that in a little bit. So they take out massive amounts of loans so that when they pass, the homes most likely are not going to go to their children or grandchildren. It's going to be taken possession of by the bank. Right? And then the supply remains the same because they continuously work to depress it. The only way to fix the American housing crisis is to prevent corporations from being able to monopolize our housing market. For me, I consider the easiest solution is a progressive housing tax, where the more homes you own, the more you pay in taxes. You own one home, you pay the price of 1 or 0.5 homes. You actually pay less in housing taxes annually. You own 2 homes, you pay the price of 2 homes. You have your main home, you have your summer home. Cool. Or your winter home. If you own 3 homes, you might pay the price of 4. You own 5 homes, you might pay the price of 9. You own 10 homes, you pay the price of 50. You own 50 homes, you pay the price of 500 homes. And I just kind of see it as a progressive housing tax where, exponentiality, a factor of 10. That's what I would prefer to see, but it would have to be implemented slowly to give the banks time to sell off their stock of homes gradually. Because right now, Like I'm thinking over the course of like 20 to 50 year time frame to implement this so that the banks can slowly bring their stock back onto the market. Because if we force something like that into play immediately, you'd see a housing crash worse than '08. You'd see homes would be worth maybe $10,000 on average. Like, imagine the financial turmoil that would bring upon the average American citizen, whether you own a home or not. Like, over time, it would be a market correction. The bubble would burst. People could afford a home again. And our American economy would come back even stronger than it is right now. But I prefer to reduce the suffering in the meantime, because such ham-fisted policies could be devastating. That level of foresight. I'm open to listening to different solutions. Instead of a progressive housing tax, it could just be they're required to sell off their housing over next 10 years, and no corporate organization, no entity or children entities of one larger entity can own more than 100 homes in total. That could be an option. I'm open to listening. I'm open to discussion on it, but I'm not open to leaving the problem as is. Because I don't think that the boomer generation dying off is going to be the solution that we're all waiting for. The system is designed to protect itself. And when you have a system so robust that people are making billions, if not trillions of dollars from it, it's going to protect itself even stronger. Right?
Yeah, which would seem like a progressive income tax, which would have to be probably on like the federal level or something. I don't know. But that would seem hard to implement.
It would be very hard to implement. It would require nationwide demand. And I don't know if I'm the person that could even possibly do that. For me, like here in Washington, we couldn't even implement such a rule because we have so few vacant homes. Our vacancy rate is probably the lowest in the nation, is what I was told. So I haven't been able to use one of the core things that I've studied for years as a campaign platform when I was running, because it just doesn't affect us as much. I wouldn't have the capability to fix that while I was running for Spokane Valley City Council. It's just not something I could do. I could put my expertise in supply chains to work. I could try to fix our temporary housing crisis where instead like 1 in 3 homes are built with more permanent solutions. I brought up the idea of getting clay from Clayton and bricks from the Pond Array. That's how homes were built in Spokane. That's how we built Spokane City. We used local materials and local supply chains, all of which invigorated our local inland empire's economy and built that city from the ground up using bricks and mortar. Local solutions. And they're permanent. Those buildings are going to stand for another 100 years. Have you been to the Spokane County Courthouse yet?
Mm-hmm.
That was built in 3 years using only local materials. Imagine being able to build a building of that quality and scale in 3 years.
And that was back then.
That was back then.
Yeah.
The reason why it's on the north side of the river instead of the south side of the river was because it was more difficult to transport the bricks and mortar across the bridges. That's why we positioned it where it is.
Oh.
Supply chains affect every portion of our lives. And I wanted to put that to work for the citizens of Spokane Valley. I still do, quite frankly, but I could do that through just advising. I've been trying to advise people, give solutions to problems. Like right now, the largest problem with the housing cost inside of the Spokane Valley and Spokane County region, I was told that 5 families own 50% of Spokane Valley's land, and they are unwilling to develop it because they're land speculators. That's the term. They're land speculators. So that means, are you familiar with Georgism? I'm jumping all over the place. I feel like I might overwhelm you.
Georgism, like King George or Georgia, the state of...
No, it actually comes from a gentleman in New York City. His name was George.
George.
he proposed a separate tax structure around housing taxes. Because as it stood, the people of New York City were building the homes, improving the land, bringing value to the surrounding area, and driving the cost of the land up because they were the ones putting in the work. But the people who weren't doing a darn thing, the people who owned the vacant land and didn't work at all, paid the lowest housing tax because it was undeveloped land. And the people who were putting in all the work, building homes, building factories, building ports and utilities, they were the ones that was getting taxed the highest because they were getting taxed the value of the land and the value of the buildings on the land. Georgism flips that on its head. It taxes the land speculators more because they're basically leeches on the society. I believe we had a conversation previously how land actually belongs to the government.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, technically all land in America is socialized. If you pay a housing tax, you don't live on sovereign land. You live on American soil. And there are a few places in the world where you have sovereign land. There's a few places in like England and Scotland and a few places in Africa. But by and large, all land in the world is socialized. The government owns it and you pay to live on it. And that segues pretty clearly into natural monopolies. Would you like to switch topics, or do you have any questions on anything we've discussed previously?
Well, we can go to natural monopolies. That's cool.
All right.
Yeah.
So, do you know what a natural monopoly is?
I came across the definition before a few times, but I think it has to do with, like, and I can see how they would be made, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm like the only person who can go and get this specific new element that nobody knows about, and this new element's like really important, and I'm the only one, I'm the first to market, and anybody else who tries to start up and tries to do things off of what I do, I can just buy them out or just throw them or just bury them in legal fees and all that stuff.
That isn't what you just described is not a natural monopoly.
Okay.
That is an anti-competitive monopoly where you compete against your competition in anti-competitive ways. You break the rules, you force them out of the market, you buy them out, you monopolize the market. That's not naturally occurring. That under the Sherman Antitrust Act, that would violate sections 1 and 2. I took a class on antitrust policy and regulations.
I'll learn new things every day.
Cool. A natural monopoly is a monopoly naturally occurring. And in my research, by the way, this isn't according to a textbook. I have deliberately become an expert in natural monopolies because of some, I'll discuss it later. There are 5 types. There are regional natural monopolies. Think a utility district, like a water district. I'm the water commissioner of East Spokane, Water District number 1, commissioner number 2. What we do is we have one water line going to every home. Would it be efficient or even feasible to run 2 power lines with 2 competing water, underwater or underground water mains to every single home to compete on price?
No, same with,
Yeah.
grid.
That would be absolutely ludicrous. So a water district is considered a natural monopoly, a regional natural monopoly. So if it's a regional natural monopoly, then that's 1. They qualify for, there's a lot of different types of regional natural monopolies, but usually they qualify as utilities. The next one would be, I wrote them down. It would be competition abhorrent natural monopolies. So think police stations or fire departments who share the same overlapping jurisdiction. This is my case. Or ambulances, usually emergency services. This is my case. No, this is my case. This is my patient. No, this is my patient. This is my fire. No, this is my fire. It costs precious time, precious seconds. Back when police departments and fire departments were privatized, fire departments would get into fist fights and sabotage each other's equipment while the residential house was burning because they wanted to put out the fire to make the money. So, yes, you could feasibly have 2 fire departments with overlapping jurisdictions, 2 police departments and 2 ambulance departments, but it doesn't seem very smart. So they qualify as competition abhorrent natural monopolies. And if you're noticing something so far about natural monopolies, usually they're socialized. The next one is defense natural monopolies. Think military and paramilitary organizations. You can't have 2 competing missions and 2 competing command chain structures inside of the same area of operations without there being a threat of stepping on each other's toes or hurting each other or killing each other even. Even if you aren't enemies, you can still hurt each other. That's why the U.S. military is socialized. It's the largest socialized industry on Earth.
And that's why they have commanders get moved out after like every 2 years from command, so they don't build loyalty.
Yes. It's because our loyalty in the U.S. military is to the Constitution and to the people of America, right? Mm-hmm. That was the oath, threats foreign and domestic. So what I learned was, when it comes to natural monopolies, this was kind of the beginning of it. When it comes to natural monopolies, good rule of thumb is they should probably be socialized. Upon my research, water districts that are privatized charge exorbitantly more money for water and provide way less quality of water, way more contaminated, lower quality of pipes, rust in the water, and a whole host of other really bad things. I can provide you the statistics. I'm writing a paper on it right now about natural monopolies, and water districts are just kind of my example. Excuse me. These pullers are really good.
Great.
So, the next type that I was writing about, let's see if I can remember. Right. It would be... You know what? I think I'm not going to expose everything on my paper because it's still a work in progress. But if you want, I can just do a quick rundown of what some things that I've All right, so what I've been doing is, in my role of politician, I go around and use my connections to talk to experts in the field. I've talked to CEOs of hospitals, CEOs of banks and credit unions and so many other things in order to try to establish what's a natural monopoly and what's not. Because I'm always working on something in the background, and I'm a massive nerd. One thing that I've learned is a natural monopoly: hospitals and insurance. Insurance falls under something what's known as compounding natural monopolies. Also could be called snowballing natural monopolies. Think social media, where the more, like in a social media network, the more users you have, the more likely other people are going to join your social media application to hang out with their friends in the social network. Well, that applies to insurance as well. In insurance, they need a large enough amount of people paying into the insurance in order to cover the losses that happen due to insurance payouts. Which means that the only insurance agencies that can reliably survive and pay out would be the largest ones with the most amount of customers, making them a natural monopoly. Only the ones with monopolistic power can be insurance agencies, preventing new ones from entering the market. So right now there's a movement in the left, I believe left here in Washington. I believe it's called Whole Health Washington. They want to transfer us to a single-payer healthcare insurance network where we all pay one healthcare insurance that's state-owned and operated, and then that pays out to the hospitals whenever we get in trouble, whenever one of us are injured or sick or unhealthy. That's the most efficient way to be able to handle health insurance. Every state, every nation that implements single-payer healthcare does, though. Now, I also support a privatized health insurance as an alternative for those who want to. I believe David Womack, running for CD5, Congressional District 5, is the one that says health care for all who want it. That way, I don't particularly trust the government, as I think I made pretty clear earlier. I don't necessarily want them making all of my medical decisions. So I'd probably opt for a privatized health insurance plan, but I'd also really like to have one guaranteed to me in case I break my leg. I can go in and get that fixed without worrying about going into massive debt and losing my home. Well, that goes into the other side of things. Hospitals don't qualify as a regional natural monopoly. Instead, there's something different. I'm forgetting the term that I placed on them. But basically the point is, when was the last time that you went, before going into the hospital, you compared prices? Never. It's impossible to compare prices. I've heard some things about the Trump administration trying to force hospitals to allow people to call ahead and compare prices. It's a Band-Aid fix. Because when you go into the hospital, say getting a shot or giving birth, well, you're quoted for X amount of dollars to go in and give birth. Well, the baby's upside down and the umbilical cord's around the neck. Sorry, we're going to have to do a C-section. That drives up the price by another $20,000. And we're going to have to do an epidural, another $5,000. And we're going to need to use scalpels and all these patches and all these things and put you under and yada, 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 yada. It goes on and the price goes up exponentially. You can't really predict what's going to happen in a hospital. That's why price prediction doesn't work. That's the term that I used. It was... So... The hospitals actually fall under several different types of natural monopoly. It's called cost prohibitive natural monopoly. High cost of entry, high barrier to entry, whatever you want to call it. It's basically when you need to have the financial capital of a government in order to build this good or service. Think nuclear power plants. You need to have $50 billion minimum just to get in the door and get it built, right? Mm-hmm. So either you accept that there are going to be certain individuals in your nation with the power of a government who can rival entire state governments, entire federal governments, or you don't allow cost-prohibitive natural monopolies to fall into privatized hands. Hospitals are one of them. Average cost nationwide, rule of thumb, $1 million per bed. That doesn't account for all the extra services that high-end hospitals provide, such as MRI machines, such as the operating rooms, surgery rooms, things like that. Every additional good and service that a hospital provides drives up the price by millions. So either the people who build the hospitals need to have the financial capital to rival a government, or we can socialize them. Majority of nations on Earth either have a single-payer healthcare system where they socialize the natural monopoly on healthcare insurance, or they socialize the hospitals themselves. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't allow private practice. Private practice is a different thing. You don't trust the government-run hospital? Good, me neither. You can hire your own family doctor. That's usually what they were doing. But preventative care saves billions of dollars annually. Preventative care is really important. American life expectancy has been dropping compared to almost every other nation on Earth, and it's because of the way we treat American healthcare. It's because we don't actually know the difference between an unnatural monopoly and a natural monopoly, right? Socialism is such a dirty word. As I stated earlier, socialism is the government co-opting private entities. But there's certain private entities that probably should be co-opted, such as natural monopolies. Those are the only ones that I've ever been able to find an actual economic argument in order to support it. But even then, there are two other things you can do before it. You can force them, or you can regulate them. You can only make X amount of profit. You can force them to be run as a non-profit. You can't even make profit at all. Or you socialize it. I prefer going in a tiered system, starting with regulation, and then if that doesn't work and the people are still being exploited, then you go to the option of forcing them to be run as a nonprofit. But if they're still exploiting the population, yeah, socialize it. Look at the non-profit crisis here in America. Majority of hospitals are non-profit, legally speaking, but they make billions of dollars annually. I can provide you articles later if you would like, but you could also do your own research and look it up.
This is nonprofit, Sacred Heart.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
I haven't heard much about those being scummy, but there are a lot of nonprofit hospitals nationwide that make massive amounts of profit that they are not legally allowed to do. But
The
they do it
NFL is a
nonprofit. Yes. In a way, I've been working on these things. I guess I'm more of an economist than anything else, just because, like, I've been studying this stuff so avidly for several years now, that, and mixed with my history of supply chains and as a peon grunt blue collar worker, as a child laborer, I see things from such a unique perspective. I should not have the education I have. It's because of my time in the military. It's because of my access to the internet, unfiltered by AI. I just learned constantly. Remember back in the heyday on YouTube, there was an educational renaissance with channels like Vsauce and Smarter Every Day and several
Khan
others.
Academy.
Yes, and Khan Academy.
Yeah.
There was this amazing intellectual educational renaissance happening online, and I feel like it's died. I feel like I can't find it anymore. And maybe it's the algorithm trying to keep me away from it. Maybe I just don't fall into the categories that it lists anymore because I got aged out of it. Or maybe it's because it genuinely did die. But I was very fortunate to not only have access to it. I consider that the fortunate part. The unfortunate part is that I was so isolated that it was the only thing I could do. So I watched all of it. I can't even list the amount of information I have or random eclectic info I have. It's just sometimes you ask a question or bring up something and it just sends me down a tangent.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have I switched topics so far?
Well, several, but that's fine. But you keep going back to the definitions that you first gave, which is good.
I try. When it comes to the difference between socialism and fascism, I don't want them controlling private industry. If they're making a profit, we should never allow the government to make a profit. Never, even, ever. The government needs to remain non-profitable. Because the second that we allow them to make a profit, it means that's the second that they can exploit us. Because who are they making that profit from? They have absolute monopolistic and monopsonistic control. There's a word.
Monopsonistic?
Monopsony.
Monopsony.
Yes. Monopsony. Sole purchaser of a product. Most people don't know what that means. Monopsony is the sole purchaser of a product. So think of it this way. The U.S. government is a monopsony of nuclear bombs in America.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're the only ones that it's allowed to buy a nuclear bomb.
Word of the day, monopsony.
Yes, monopsony. That, and then 2 words of the day is natural monopoly.
Natural monopoly, the phrase of the day.
Yep. So monopsony is the sole purchaser of a product. Let's shrink it down a lot. You are the sole lumber mill in 100 miles. Everyone who lives in your town, a good majority of them, provide lumber-related labor. You are the sole hirer of lumber-related labor. Right? Okay, so you're the sole purchaser of lumber-related labor. You set the price. It's called price-setting power. You can do it either as a monopoly, where you set the price that people buy it at, or you set the price that you're going to be buying it at. That's the power of a monopsony. Most people don't notice this. Hell, my own professor in antitrust policy and regulation heard the term monopsony before, but forgot the definition when I started my semester at Gonzaga. Excuse me. So, check this out. I find this really fascinating because I grew up very far right. I always thought of unions as communist devilry, right? That's what I was told. Like, a lot of them are Satan worshiping communists. Until I recognized the important economic role that unions pull to counter monopsonies. So if you are a monopsony of lumber-related labor, you can set the price low, and you can also set the standards of work, the safety of your work, the work quality, as low as possible. Someone dies on the job, okay, whatever. You're saving a buck. If you're a heartless business person, that's what you do. And honestly, most of the time, I don't think that they're all that heartless. Remember how I go back to the definition of incompetence and malice? Most business people just look at the cost of the safety and say, hey, let's cut that. Not really thinking about the consequences of their actions. Most white collar workers that I've ever met never worked a blue collar job in their life. They don't know the dangers that we were exposed to on a daily basis. They didn't know the dangers of exposing us to burnt phosphorus or welding inside of an enclosed space or being lit on fire in 110 degree weather. All of those happened to me while I was working as a millwright, by the way. Quite a dangerous job. Mm-hmm. Anyway, most of them I don't consider as malicious, but they just aren't thinking about it. They're incompetent. Anyway, they set the price low. They set the wages low in order to increase profits. Well, how do you counter a monopsony? A monopoly. A monopoly of labor, otherwise known as a union. All the workers band together and say, no, we will not sell our labor unless you pay X price. And then the monopsony, with their buying power, say, no, we will not buy your labor at that price. We will buy it at X price or Y price, a little bit lower. And then they negotiate and meet somewhere in the middle. But without the union, without the monopoly of labor, there can be no negotiation against the monopsony of labor. But a monopoly is not just the sole seller. Monopolies can also form through collusion, intentional or otherwise. Unintentional collusion isn't illegal, but intentional collusion is. So I'm just going to focus on unintentional collusion. Unintentional collusion is when I'm selling soda. I price my soda at $1 a can, and all the other people look at my $1 a can, and they can decide whether they want to set it at 95 cents a can or $1.05 a can, right? Well, but I still set the price. That's unintentional collusion. We all just kind of agree, yeah, it's worth around $1. Well, look at it in the sense of an unintentional collusion under a monopsony, with them publishing hiring data and wage data in mass aggregate quantities on sources like Indeed or other labor and hiring related data sets, right? Well, now you have an unintentional collusion where everyone wants to set their starting wage 15% below the average. What would that do over the course of about 50 years, where everyone decides simultaneously to set their prices roughly 15% below the average? It would depress wages for decades. Well, if you look at I can provide a chart later if you would like, but if you look at the production of the average American worker, we've doubled since the 1980s. We've gone up 100%. Every American who's working today, due to increases in technology, can output twice as much as we did back in the 80s. Good job. Why haven't wages kept up? Wages, when accounting for inflation, have gone down 7%. minimum wage is the same it was in the, what was it, the 80s or the 90s? I think it was the 80s. Minimum wage is the same. Wages have been continuously depressed for decades because of the monopsony power that hiring data has. And coincidentally enough, it was also caused by a decrease in unions. One thing I learned when I was studying this, because I wanted to learn more about monopsonies and unions, and I've never even been a member of a union, but now I'm darn near their biggest fan. Why? Because I recognize their economic importance. But here's the key. When it comes to unions and their history, you also understand that they saved America from a communist revolution. In the 1930s, and 40s, during the Great Depression, America had a growing communist revolution party. They wanted to take over. But the unions, invigorated by the New Deal, by a democratic socialist, FDR, who was not as pro-union as most people might think, they decided to get to work. They continued to raise wages and make the average person in America more wealthy. Everyone in America, every conservative that I know, every true conservative that I know worships the economy of the 1950s. We were making money. Everyone could own a home. Everyone could work their way to the top and achieve the American dream. But they never mention that union membership in the 1950s was the highest point it had ever been in American history. Do you know what the luxury good to household good pipeline is?
No.
Okay. So it's an economic concept where you start off with luxury goods that are usually handcrafted and handmade using artisan tools and artisan equipment. Think a washing machine, for example. One artisan could spend a year making a single washing machine. Who could buy a year's worth of labor? A super wealthy individual. So they sell their washing machine for $100,000, take that $100,000 and reinvest it so that they can build 2 washing machines. And they sell those for $75,000 each. Then they reinvest it, that $150,000, reinvest it, and then they're able to make an annual production of 10, then 100 washing machines, then 1,000, then 100,000, and then soon enough, the luxury good that was previously only accessible to the ultra wealthy becomes accessible to all. But then what we do is once it reaches that accessibility point, people start to reiterate on it, improve upon it. The compounding effect, the greatest invention mankind has ever created, according to Albert Einstein, was compounding interest, compounding knowledge, where we just make things a little bit better every year. Well, that's where the luxury good to common household good becomes so important. Examples of previous luxury goods that are now common household items: computers. 1980s, that right there would have been, in the 1950s, that would have been more than enough to power every computer on the planet. Now, even in the 1980s, this has more processing power than nearly every computer on the planet.
Oh, yeah, it has more processing power than what went to the moon.
Exponentially so.
Yeah, all the Gemini missions and stuff.
Yeah. Air conditioning, refrigerators, stovetops, electrical lighting, cameras.
Oh, yeah.
Like microphones. So much of what we take for granted in the modern day used to be considered a luxury good. So this is why I say, I know this is very controversial, I believe a small amount of economic inequality in a nation is actually good. Because who else is going to have the money or capital to be able to take a risk on a luxury good that may or may not be worth it? But over time, you need to have enough economic stability where it can turn into that mass production, where everyone gains access to that amazing tool, because then they can reiterate on it and make something better the next time for the next generation. and the next reiteration. And that's why fascism and usually what results, what's it called? Feudalism. Feudalism defined is when very few people own everything and everyone just rents on it. Feudalism is the antithesis to a healthy economy. Think Middle Ages Europe. The king and the pope owned all the land and the peasants just worked on it. There was no indoor plumbing. Oh, indoor plumbing. That's another example of a previous luxury good that only the king and the nobility had. But once we increased the capabilities of mass production and common production, sure enough, we were all able to get, most of us were able to get indoor plumbing. So a small amount of economic inequality is good because it allows for people to take risks and start building it. But too much economic inequality means that the normal layman can no longer afford these new goods. I don't think people are going to be able to afford computers, laptops, or phones in a decade if things keep going the way they are. Which means that most information technology is going to die. How many children, how many programmers that have been building AI started on their home family laptop practicing coding? We are going to lose an entire generation of IT and coding professionals, entire generation, because the economy is becoming so centralized. In a decade, people cannot afford to do anything but survive. We're all going to be renters. That's my ultimate goal, is just to prevent feudalism, which, by the way, means that it doesn't just help the common layman, because it also helps the ultra wealthy. Do they really want to go back to living in the castle with pathetic indoor plumbing where it just runs outside into the moat? If you don't have access for everyone to be able to achieve what used to be luxury goods once it becomes a commonplace good, then they lose access to all these brand new inventions. They lose access to that intellectual capacity of the people. Going back to what I was talking about with education, if you treat the people poorly, they aren't going to think of themselves highly. They aren't going to be able to explore. They aren't going to be able to invent. And ultimately, it means they will have access to less luxury goods. And the luxury goods that they do have will degrade over time. And who are they going to hire to fix it? Nobody learned how to operate on a computer, right? Who are their children and grandchildren going to be able to hire to fix their spacecraft if there's no one around who knows how an engine works? Because we're all too dirt poor, living in the mud and squalor, and trying to survive to be able to fix their engine, right? So ultimately, high levels of economic inequality is bad for the American people and bad for the ultra wealthy, because it's going to result in both of us eating ourselves alive and degrading in our quality of life over time. Am I making a little bit of sense here, or am I losing you?
Well, you talk, and I think of all sorts of different examples of things. So
Do you want us to bring some of those up?
Well, going back to you talked about the natural monopolies, and then the word of the day, I forget that
Monopsony.
Monopsony. So the monopsony as a group of people who only buy a certain thing. And I noticed, so growing up, my family in Wenatchee, we had a cherry orchard. And in the end, the cherry orchard went out of business and they had to sell off and all that.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, my grandpa got old and no one wanted to run it. And, well, here's the thing. Before that happened, the monopsony happened. Because all the fruit sheds in Wenatchee, all the fruit shed people, so if you're a local orchardist, specifically with sensitive fruit, you take it to the first shed, especially cherries. So cherries are very sensitive. And these monopsonies, these the fruit sheds, and there were several of them in Wenatchee, there still are. They get together and they collude and they set that price that they're going to pay. And then they get together and they're going to collude, and then they say, if you're not a farmer that owns a minimum of 50 plus acres, we're not taking your product. So that's what happened. But either way, yeah, my uncles, I remember them bitching, calling it a cartel, but yeah.
That's actually, so you're right, they were right. It is a cartel on both ends. Mm-hmm. So they collude to set the prices low from buying it.
Pay the farmer.
But they also deliberately excluded a lot of the smaller farmers.
Yep, that's how they kicked them out.
To reduce the supply and increase price.
Unless
which means
you wanted to drive all the way to Yakima to take your product, which that shipping cost would be ridiculous.
Yeah, and so by doing that, they would have been able to sell, because they reduced the supply and demand remained the same, they would have been able to charge a higher price for the cherries that they resold. Mm-hmm. So they were simultaneously a monopsony and a monopoly on both ends. There are currently, to my knowledge, no laws, rules, or regulation barring monopsonies. There's some things about like contractual anti-competitive behavior, but that's what it would fall under. Anti-competitive. It doesn't specify monopsony. It's a term most people don't know of, but once you hear it, once you learn the concept, you can just walk around and start to see monopsonies everywhere. And it's such a vital, important part of economics that just has been ignored. I don't know anyone who talks about monopsonies on a regular basis. I heard about it as an offhand comment from one professor from I think it was Australia, and it was literally just an offhand. And then I learned the definition of it, and then I ran with it from there. Most of what I talk about when it comes to monopsonies, the definition is just what I told you. Sole purchaser of a product or good or service. I had to come up with most of my examples. I had to come up with how that relates to labor. I had to discover that. I'm glad that you're doing the same thing, recognizing what these sheds did to your family and the injustice that was performed. I wish that the government could have stepped in, because ultimately that's what's needed to keep a healthy free market. I'm a huge fan of the free market, of capitalism. It's one of the reasons why I'm not very much appreciated on the farther left. They definitely like my terms of socialized natural monopolies, but when I say protect mercantile capitalism, protect the ability of the free market to decide what people want and what they want to buy, what they want produced, what they want in their homes and in their lives, that's invaluable. And I consider that something that should be protected, something valuable.
So let's talk about the concept of slavery. Now they say like for 3 months out of the year you're a slave to the government because of the taxes you have to pay.
Depends on who you are, how much you make, and I would not actually. That sounds like a very misleading one. Do you know how progressive income tax works?
The more money you have, the more in taxes you pay.
Yes, but not really.
More money you make, I should say.
Yes. How progressive income tax works in America is you make from between $0 and $22,000, you pay zero in taxes. Because that's the poverty line. They aren't going to be taking money from people who are below the poverty line. So none of them would be considered a slave to the government.
In fact, the government owes you money if
very often.
You worked.
Very often. Then what happens is once the money above between $22,000 and $35,000 is taxed at 5% income. That 5% does not affect the initial $22,000. That's only the $13,000, so 5% of $13,000. Then once you make it above $35,000 to $45,000 to $55,000, you hit the next tax bracket. And that higher tax bracket of 7% does not affect anything below $35,000. And it keeps stacking like that, where it only taxes the money that's directly on top and not the money below. Why is that important? Remember how I was talking about how a healthy economy doesn't have too much economic inequality? That's how it's designed. It's designed to keep people working. I'm going to sound extremely unethical real quick. The design of the U.S. tax system is to keep people working, keep people productive. It's designed to make it so that ultra-wealthy individuals will continue going to their jobs instead of settling in, kicking their feet up, and retiring. That's how our system is kind of designed. And that's how it would work in practice if we were actually enforcing good amounts of tax laws. People who were born into billionaires and trillionaire families, trust fund kids, they wouldn't be receiving such a huge inheritance that they would never have to work again, becoming dredges on society, and ultimately making people feel awful about their lives. Because if you see one kid born with a diamond spoon in their mouth while you're working every day in your life, you're going to be a little angry. So a healthy amount of economic inequality would be, I'm just bringing them down enough where they would want to work. They'd be working an extremely successful and productive job. They'd be CEOs or lawyers or doctors or something like that, where they would have access to be able to pursue those higher things. They could also be pursuing the arts. There's a amazing quote from, I believe it was President Adams. "I work the field so that my son will work in the factory. My son will work in the factory so that his son will pursue the arts." That was the American dream. The American dream wasn't to just say, screw you, I got mine. The American dream was to make the nation better and more prosperous so that people would have the freedom to work toward the goals that they want to work toward. Nobody wants to sit around on their butts doing nothing all day. I've met several trust fund children who have millions of dollars at their expense, and they're all miserable. They don't pursue the arts, or at least none of the ones that I met were pursuing the arts or education. They were just sitting around doing nothing. They had no work ethic, and it was sad. They were depressed. You want to know why so many of them turned to drugs or alcohol or addiction in some other way? That's why. They don't have meaning in their lives. Man determines their own meaning. I find meaning in my pain. I was raised in a horrible way and used. You mentioned slavery. I was used as forced labor on my parents' ranch since the age of 10. I was used as a landscaper and several other jobs, as a farmer and a ranch hand, unpaid, 10 hours a day to 14 hours a day through the heat of summer, under threat of beatings, isolation, and starvation. I don't consider paying taxes as slavery. I consider forced labor as slavery. I consider people who use others under threat of violence, beatings, under threat of psychological torment, isolation. What's it called? It was labeled as torture by the UN. It's practiced here in American prisons. It's isolation. What's it called when you throw someone in the hole and they're alone for months?
Sensory deprivation. Is it part
close.
of torture, but yeah, isolation torture.
Yeah, isolation torture.
You break people doing that.
Yeah, but inside of the U.S. prison system, we throw them into the isolation.
Yeah, in the hole.
In the hole, right? That's torture and starvation. That one we don't really do it to our prisoners, thank goodness. But my parents would regularly quote, "If you don't work, you don't eat." And they followed through. If I didn't work, I didn't eat. And that was miserable as a child. So I take my pain from my childhood of being used for labor and exploited and almost died on the job site multiple times, being lit on fire, getting heat stroke so often. I had to find meaning in the pain. And the meaning that I found was to try to prevent others from suffering the same fate I did. That's my ultimate goal in my life, is just make the world a little bit better than the world that I was raised in. Through compound interest, through the sharing of knowledge and information, through dissemination, through the invention of new ideas.
So it begs the question, how is your relationship with your parents now?
I've recently had to cut contact with them. I was working to maintain it for a long time, but there came a point when it was too painful. I mentioned earlier they're very far right. I explained to them that Nick Fuentes was an open Nazi who was feeding a lot of influencers in the Republican sphere talking points and information in order to Nazify the Republican Party. They did not believe me. A couple months ago, you might be familiar with Nick Fuentes' drama as it came out that he had direct access to multiple of the major national figures in the Republican Party and was feeding them data. I told them this 2-3 years ago. They didn't listen. Well, there was a consequence to them not listening. Have you heard about the suspension of due process?
I know that happens, like habeas, like fucking Lincoln did it.
Yes, and I would not support it then, and I don't support it now. So the right of habeas corpus and due process was established in 1215. Not the time, that's the year. That's the year that the Magna Carta was signed into law by the King of England, and we inherited that. Almost every nation on earth, except for the most authoritarian of regimes, have the right of habeas corpus. Here's why. You have your birth certificate, I'm assuming, right? Okay.
No, I'm an illegal.
All right. You have your birth certificate. That's fantastic. I'm glad. So do I. You're a Ukrainian immigrant. Due process has been suspended. We're going to deport you now to a concentration camp in El Salvador. But you can't do that. I have my birth certificate. Great. Which judge are you going to show that to without due process? Which judge, which jury will be able to evaluate you if you do not have due process? Answer: none. If one singular person in the United States, a single individual, does not have the right to due process, not a single American has the right to due process, because they can just, the government can just claim, oh, you're this person. Boom, you're gone. That's what they did with the Jewish individuals. They said inside of Nazi Germany, they suspended due process for them. And then they started rounding them up and putting them in camps. Kilmar Obrego Garcia, he was a legal immigrant here legally in the United States and was on a protection order by a judge. A judge directly said that the U.S. government cannot deport Kilmar Obrego Garcia without that judge's approval. He had the fullest extent of government protection that can be afforded to an immigrant. The U.S. government snatched him up on the street, sent him to a concentration camp in El Salvador, which, by the way, no one leaves. Seacott Prison. Have you done any research on it? Seacott Prison is a concentration camp and a death camp simultaneously. They don't put the people to work. Instead, they torture them until dead. El Salvador suspended their constitution, suspended the right of due process, rounded up all of the gangs locally, and put them in prison. But it wasn't just...
Oh,
yes.
I've seen this.
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen that documentary. And
Yeah.
all the tattooed faces, mostly MS-13 gang members.
That's what they want to claim. But the thing is, the El Salvadorian president also had all of his political opposition disappeared simultaneously. All of the political opposition in El Salvador disappeared with the gangs. Not all of them were associated with the gangs. They found an opportunity to suspend habeas corpus and due process, and they immediately took advantage of it to not just prosecute the gangs, but also prosecute and disappear their political opponents. Dead and gone. No one, and by the way, they already rounded them up. The streets are safe. Why haven't they returned the right of the Constitution? Why haven't they started giving trials to the people held in CCOT? Why hasn't El Salvador started providing due process once again? Answer, because the political opposition is dead or gone or being tortured on a daily basis. And we sent people who were protected in America to that place. And you want to know what the U.S. president said on a hot mic? Build another prison. We're going to have a load of homegrowns coming. U.S. citizens disappeared and sent to El Salvador because they do not have the right of due process and habeas corpus. So I mentioned earlier that I got out of the U.S. military. And when I did, I moved back to Idaho. I started going on weekly ruck marches with a host of veteran groups over there. I was making friends. I was being recruited for Project 2025. I read Project 2025. Are you familiar with it?
I have heard it on the news, people talking about this. I have personally never seen anything.
Read it if you have the time. Project 2025 was a project that was supposed to be initiated as soon as a conservative president won in 2025 or 2024, and then as soon as he takes office in 2025, a massive restructuring in the U.S. government. I read the whole thing because they were trying to recruit me for it. I was an E4 in the military from Idaho, just like Pete Hegseth. My sister actually goes to Pete Hegseth's church. I suspect that I was being interviewed to be the new Secretary of War. But I read through it, and I immediately saw a lot of red flags. I saw it was a fascist takeover of the U.S. government. I saw that it was a rise in authoritarianism, but the largest red flag was what was going on with the intelligence agencies. They were not going to be replacing those inside of the intelligence agencies with people who are just Republican or conservative. No, they said they're going to be firing all the liberals inside of these intelligence agencies and only hiring people who swear allegiance to a conservative president. Not the Constitution, a conservative president. The president, Donald Trump. By time I read that in Project 2025, and that's only the public document. There's another private one that was being shared around too. By time I read that, I knew that the next several years of my life was going to be spent trying to hopelessly resist the rise of authoritarianism in America because we were backsliding into Nazi Germany very quickly. And I think that's what's happening. We've put in a lot of work. There's a lot of good people who are putting in a lot of good work throughout not just Spokane, but throughout the entire United States to ensure the right of due process. I thank them and appreciate them deeply, but that's not the only front. There's a lot of fronts. That's like the core one, because if you can get rid of due process, you can get rid of anyone. But I'm worried, because when it comes to, it's not left or right, it's right and wrong to me. I'm still Reagan Republican. You know, I deeply understand economics. I'm very pro-business, but when it comes to the suspension of due process, okay, I just bribed the local, I'm a competing podcaster. I have my own podcast. You and I are in competition. We have the same market. Okay, I just bribed the local ICE officer. You are now a Ukrainian immigrant. Bye. Business cannot be free under an authoritarian government, because if you can just bribe an official to disappear you, they legalize tips to public officials. People, as a elected water commissioner, apparently I can receive a $10,000 tip tax-free and be perfectly fine and legal. That's insane. I would.
Good to know. Thank you.
I'm not going to accept any of that, but that's now legal under the U.S. government, and that law was passed by the Republican Party and Donald Trump. That means that all these pro-business individuals inside of the Republican Party, they are directly supporting their competition, because all they need to do is have one of their competitors bribe the local official and have you disappeared. How many people inside of Nazi Germany were not Jews,
now this is
but were
contingent
killed?
that I would be, in fact, a Ukrainian immigrant.
No, because without due process, Where's your birth certificate?
Well, I mean, I would see it hard for them to do it to me personally.
Well, you can see that, but without if the ICE agents come barging in and you're like, hey, I have my birth certificate, they're like, I'm not going to see that. You're not seeing a judge.
That would seem very
Scary?
that over the top.
It's happening. That's what happened with Comaro Abrego Garcia. He told them, hey, I'm legally protected here. Here's my legal protection order. You don't have the right of due process.
Was he a
Threw it
U.S.
away.
citizen?
He was not a U.S. citizen. He was
Okay,
under a
so yeah,
protection.
I'm a U.S.
system.
citizen.
But
so-
if you allow for non-U.S. citizens to be deported without due process, we can deport them.
Keep talking.
All right. Well, like, do you understand that if you can deport a non-legal U.S. citizen, you can also deport a legal U.S. citizen without due process?
I would be more concerned. My bigger concern would be more on like who is considered a terrorist,
Well,
and if you're a terrorist, then and if you're an illegal enemy combatant, then you would go to Gitmo. That would be like more my concern.
even then, who decides what's a terrorist and who's not? They've already tried to label any. I wrote
Exactly.
I-
Who is a terrorist and who isn't? And
I wrote a paper last year titled about protecting due process and returning Comaro Abrego Garcia so that he could have the right of due process, right? The border czar or the counterterrorism czar from the Trump administration at the time, it's changed out multiple times, but at the time, the counterterrorism czar said that anyone who was in support of returning Comaro Abrego Garcia and spoke in support of due process would be charged with aiding and abetting a terrorist. Comaro Abrego Garcia was not a terrorist. They did not even charge him with terrorism. They did not even claim he was a terrorist. In fact, if you read the Supreme Court document, which I highly recommend you do, of the case of the Comaro Abrego Garcia versus the U.S. government, the U.S. government directly admits that his deportation was a mistake. But they did not want to return him to the U.S. because of the bad optics it would provide. So they would rather let a man rot and be tortured to death inside of a concentration camp in El Salvador than to admit to bad optics. So if they would be willing to do that to someone that they know is innocent, what would they be willing to do to you or me or our children or our brothers or our sisters?
I guess I'm just too much of a sadist.
Mm-hmm.
First off, objectively, I think, okay, one guy, an immigrant,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about him, but it doesn't appear like ICE is coming in, knocking down the doors of U.S. citizens.
For now, but that's what the Gestapo was doing. It started off with knocking on the doors of the Jews. Then it was anyone hiding the Jews. Then it was anyone that was claimed to be a Jew. Any businessman that was not aligned with the party was now suddenly Jewish or Jewish sympathizer, and they would be sent to the camps as well. A machine that feeds on the suffering of humans is a machine that should not exist. A machine that financially, a machine or a system that actually benefits financially from the exploitation of human beings and the suffering of human beings is a system that is going to only increase in the suffering. Right now, they're making billions of dollars on this massive immigration crackdown. A lot of the detention centers built nationwide are private prisons. I already covered the problems with those earlier. Why would private prison and some of the largest contributors to the Trump administration right now? Private prison industry. Specifically the private prisons who are benefiting from the contracts to build these concentration camps around the U.S. and hold quote-unquote illegal immigrants. By the way, I want to be clear. Immigration, illegal, undocumented immigration, someone just walks across our border illegally, is a misdemeanor. No worse than a speeding ticket 5 miles per hour over the speed limit. If you've sped more than 5 miles per hour over the speed limit in the past 5 years, congratulations. you are now saying that you have committed a grave sin on par with illegal immigration. And now, if you are advocating in favor of suspending due process of these illegal immigrants of a misdemeanor crime, you're supporting suspending due process of a misdemeanor crime, disappearing and sending them to concentration camps. How many misdemeanor crimes do you commit on a weekly basis, a monthly basis? We already have a system designed, as I covered earlier with the exceptions clause, a system designed to create criminals, to keep recidivism rates high, to keep people going back to prison and keep them enslaved. You are now, what you were just talking about and what my parents were talking about was turning a misdemeanor crime into an executable offense without due process. That's the level of severity that I heard my parents talking about. And when I explained this to them, they said, I understand, but there's an invasion, 10 million immigrants coming into America to attack us. They haven't been attacking us. In fact, illegal immigrants commit crimes at a lower rate than legal U.S. citizens. So why are you in support of this? It's not rational. My father is a son of a Persian immigrant and a Puerto Rican immigrant. And he's supporting the ending of birthright citizenship, which he benefited from. But also, there are other Republicans I've talked to, or I don't even want to call them Republicans, other maggots that I've talked to that are talking...
Is that what they're called now, maggots?
I call them maggots.
Oh, okay. All right.
Other maggots who support revoking the citizenship of the children of immigrants, which means my father is actually advocating in favor of ending his own citizenship and being deported without due process. But if he's no longer a citizen, guess what? That's my citizenship gone. And then if my citizenship is gone, that's my daughter's citizenship gone. I'm a third generation immigrant. On my father's side. On my mother's side, I'm fifth, sixth generation. But still, where do we draw the line? Who's an immigrant and who's not when you are allowed to revoke citizenship? Who's an immigrant and who's not when you are, like, how many generations have you been in? Like, the shortest number. Your grandfather or grandmother on either side.
4.
4? All right. I'm third. They revoke your grandparents' citizenship, then your parents' citizenship, then your citizenship. That's how dangerous they can become if you start revoking people's citizenship. I stressed these points to them. They understood them fully. They had the cognitive foresight to understand it was wrong. They taught me this. Yeah, as part of what they taught me as a child was a lot of propaganda and indoctrination. But they also had me watch multiple lessons on the Nazi Germany and the progression into authoritarianism. They knew it. They recognized it. I explained it to them, and they're like, yes, this is the same thing that happened in Nazi Germany. I'm like, great. In that case, with full cognitive ability, foresight, and knowledge that what you are advocating for is wrong and will result in the deaths of millions of American citizens, not to mention the deaths of millions of just people, you choose to do it anyway. Said yes, but it's more nuanced than that. I'm like, I'm not going to listen to it. I'm not going to listen. You just proved me and admitted that you were a malicious individual. And you are putting my life and my child's life at risk by continuing to espouse the beliefs that you know is wrong. And then I looked at them and I said, a quote that I've had for a couple of years, right? I looked at them and I said, how do you rectify between a group that is wanting to live and a group demanding they die? Do you care to answer the question, Mike?
A group that is wanting to live and a group demanding they die, like...
In mass genocide. How do you rectify between a group demanding to live and another group demanding they die? How do you rectify between the two?
It's tough, but I just focus on the individual because I accept things that I can't control.
See, and I understand that, but I have a very different perspective.
Like for example, the Islamists.
Mm-hmm.
In my time in Iraq and Afghanistan, they hate the Jews. They make it explicitly clear, and they truly believe that Jews drink the blood of Muslim children. And they want to eradicate the Jews. But I could still understand Mirajan Mahmud for the person he is and the farmer he is. And I can still accept him.
And I understand that. Here's the thing, though. In order to rectify between a group demanding to live and the other demanding they die, you have to pick a side. And I made the choice years ago that I would always choose the side of life. If they wanted to eradicate every Jew on the planet, I would fight against them. I would fight on the side of the Jews. But if the Jews were trying to eradicate an entire group of people, I would fight against them. Because I have picked my side of life. As any good Christian should, as any good Christian must. I love my neighbor as myself. And my neighbor is every single person on this planet. I want everyone to live fulfilling and happy lives, prosperous lives where they can pursue life and happiness in the way that they choose to do so, as long as they are not interfering in the rights and happiness of other people. And I think that that's, at its core, that's my philosophy. I believe in it's very libertarian of me. Do whatever the hell you want with your own body and your own life, as long as you don't hurt another person. But if you do hurt another person, that's when the government should step in. That's when the government should set the rules. Because otherwise, I'm big, I'm strong, I can just walk over there, punch you in the face, take your equipment, and leave. What are you going to do about it? Well, you can call the police and then they can get me. And that's the goal, that's the role of government, to protect its citizens and ensure their prosperity, because instead of me just taking your stuff, you can instead use your stuff to build a excellent podcast, start to build a living off of it, be a productive member of, spread information throughout this city and throughout America, and have that stability and predictability. But if the government starts getting involved in things that they shouldn't be doing, then there's no more stability left. As I stated earlier, the government just comes in and your competitor bribes the local magistrate, and poof, you're gone. That's why I resist this. It's why as a Romney Republican, I resist this. Why as a Democrat, I resist what's happening in America. Because I know the economics behind it and I know what's happening. I've spent many years studying this. And quite frankly, I'm terrified. And every historian I know is even more terrified. Much, much more terrified. And when the historians are scared, you probably should be too.
So that's a lot. That's a lot to take in. So
I'm sorry. I'm a certified yapper.
No worries. But that's a good thing. So it seems as if the premise is you believe that it starts with a crackdown and hunt for illegal immigrants will lead to eventually a concentration camp for U.S. citizens.
Political dissidents, specifically.
So like the left. Will the left get rounded up
The left
and put
and the
in
political
concentration camps?
Okay, so this is the definition of identitarianism. Have you heard the term before?
I probably have, but I don't have a definition.
All right, identitarianism is the most conservative, centralized form of culture. Identitarianism is only one identity is allowed to exist. It starts right now as we are a Judeo-Christian nation. Right? That's what I'm commonly hearing from Republicans and Republican talking points. We are a Judeo-Christian nation. Atheists and Islamics and Buddhists and Sikhs and Indians and Native Americans and everyone else go away by violence if we have to. But then it goes from a Judeo-Christian nation to a Christian nation. Jews go away. Great. What type of Christianity? Okay. Catholics versus quote-unquote Christians. Catholics go away. Okay, what form of Christianity? Protestant, Baptist, Lutheran, Evangelical. Well, right now, the evangelicals have the power. So Baptists, you go away. Evangelical or Lutherans, you go away. Oh, wait. Now, because of our constant warmongering, all these desperate and separated groups are getting angry. The Catholics are threatening to wage war. Oh, right. We're returning to the holy wars that were popular in Europe for several centuries. It's called theocracy. It's called identitarianism. When you give the government the right to crack down on your neighbors, they are going to use it to crack down on you as well. Doesn't matter the time, because eventually the Catholics will get back in power and start persecuting the Christian Protestants. Or the Protestants will get back in power and start persecuting the Catholics. This happened for centuries inside of England. Bloody Mary, Queen Elizabeth. You remember these stories.
Yeah.
This is the consequence. This is what I'm predicting is going to happen, because this is what happens when you suspend due process and allow the government to hunt people not based off of their criminal actions and the level of threat they pose to society or American citizens. No, this is what happens when you allow them to hunt people just based off of immutable factors of who they are or where they were born.
And the fact that they came illegally.
It's a misdemeanor crime. You sped 5 miles per hour over the speed limit in the past week, didn't you?
Yeah, but I'm also a U.S. citizen.
Great. Doesn't matter. Same level of crime. Same level of crime. Whether you're a citizen or not, all they got to do is claim that you're not a citizen. Who would you be able to show your citizenship papers to? If you don't see a judge, who could you show them to?
Well, that's the risk I run any country I go to.
Yes, any country that suspends due process.
I run that risk. And if I'm not a citizen, and if I go there, and if I'm there breaking the law.
Mm-hmm. Well, breaking a misdemeanor law, and then they get to deport you to a concentration camp?
Well, they'll probably deport me, but here's the thing. Why would they just keep them in a concentration camp? It seems as if...
Why was Kilmar Abrego Garcia sent to CCOT, the concentration camp torture prison in El Salvador?
I don't know. I'm just seeing, aggregate.
He wasn't the only person that was sent. He wasn't the only innocent person.
Of immigrants, of illegals.
Yeah.
That came here illegally. And
yeah, you're illegal. You sped 5 miles per hour over the speed limit.
Yeah, but I'm also a legal U.S. citizen, and I also have due process rights, and I have a lot.
Until they suspend it.
Well, until that day,
which they're already working on.
If we were to take a bunch of illegals and put them into a concentration camp,
yeah,
what are you gonna do with them?
Force them to work or mass execution. Same thing they did with
Not
the Jews.
Deport them?
Well, they deported them to a concentration camp in El Salvador, which is killing them.
That's one speciic case of one guy.
No. There were multiple people that were sent. Remember how what's her name? They posted a X video on Twitter about all the people that they were sending to CCOT in chains on that plane. Go back and watch the video. Kilmar was in that video. How many of the others were innocent? We still don't know who they are. Kilmar Abrego Garcia's wife didn't know where he went. No one told her where he went. He was disappeared. There was no evidence he was gone other than he just wasn't around. They didn't tell him he was arrested, didn't tell her he was deported. She was a legal U.S. citizen. His child was a legal U.S. citizen. He was married to a legal U.S. citizen, and he was here on a legal protection order. The only reason why she found him was because she found his unique tattoo inside of a propaganda post by, I'm forgetting her name, but that's how he was found. How many other people just disappeared that day, and their families were never able to find them because they didn't find the unique tattoo that they had? How many other people disappeared that day? We don't know. That's terrifying.
What's his country of origin?
His country of origin, I believe, was Venezuela. They claimed that he was a member of MS-13. When investigated, it was found unsubstantiated. So after that, they claimed that he was a spousal abuser, but his spouse was the one that found him and demanded that he be returned and fought the legal case to bring him back. The case that he was a spousal abuser is still not a reason to deport him to a torturous murder concentration camp. That's the story of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Read it inside of the Supreme Court documents. It's a very short ruling. It's only like 5 or 6 pages, and they have large margins. But when you read it, you cannot help but be terrified that, oh crap, that can happen to me. That can happen to my family. That can happen to my child. We don't know if any of the other people that were deported to CCOT were citizens.
How long was he in the U.S.?
Like 2 decades? 20 years? About there?
Shit, that motherfucker deserved what he got.
What are you talking about? He
Yeah,
was married
he deserved what he got then.
He was here on a protection order as a political refugee, because if he went back to Venezuela, he would have been killed.
20
He was
years
married.
and he didn't take the time to get his citizenship?
He was here on a
No, I
protection
hear that
order.
all the time. Bunch of lazy-ass immigrants don't have time to go and get their citizenship.
Do you know how
They've
much
been
it
here
costs
for
to get
10
your
years.
citizenship in
Not
America?
that much.
$120,000.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No way.
Yes, it costs about $100,000 per immigrant. It's extremely expensive for the reason why I listed before with the exceptions clause.
Still, if he wanted to be here that 20 years, he couldn't make $100,000.
He was here legally. He was here, as a definition, legally, as a under a protection order and married to a U.S. citizen.
$710 to $760 if you file Form N-400, application for naturalization. You get your fingerprinting and biometrics. Yeah, there's a lot of lazy ass freaking immigrants that don't want to do this shit.
How much is it?
According to this, it's $710
No,
to
not be a U.S.
$760.
citizen. To become a U.S. citizen, how much does it cost to go from a refugee to U.S. citizen?
Okay.
You have to refine your search term.
Become a U.S. citizen
As a refugee.
as a refugee. It still says 710 to 760.
Okay, this is Google AI. I just want to make that clear to all the viewers at home.
Yeah.
No, that is...
And in this here, it says, in the people also asked, it says, does it cost $100,000 to become a U.S. citizen? And it says, USCIS provided a link to pay $100,000 fee using the pay.gov system and confirm the fee must be paid prior to filing H-1B petition in which the fee applies. USCIS will refund $100,000 fee for H-1B visa, yeah.
That's an H-1B visa. That was it. Sorry, apologies.
No worries. Okay,
That's
so
an
so
H-1B
let's
visa.
let's go back. Let's just assume you have to pay $100,000 to be a U.S. citizen.
Okay.
And you know what? I'm glad they have to pay $100,000 to get an H-1B visa, because a lot of our tech jobs are getting lost to H-1B visas. And yeah, but either way, it seems as if, though, there is this narrative that is getting around that ICE is deporting people en masse, and it seems to...
Well, they executed 2 U.S. citizens in the street. Renee Good and
Yeah, I remember hearing that.
Alex Preddy.
And,
Did you see the execution video of Alex
no.
Preddy?
Let's look up Alex Preddy. Alex Preddy shooting. Why did they get shot? Witness videos raise questions about the shooting, so...
If you watch it, they already disarmed him, and then when there was no longer a gun, they shot him.
Why was he... Why are they... What was this prior to this?
He was filming them. In his holster, which he never showed them.
This guy seems fucking insane.
No,
he probably deserves to get his ass beat. I
Okay.
mean, maybe I'm just a
watch
sadist.
watch the video directly. What happened was he was filming the ICE officers with his First Amendment right, and then they came up to him, beat the crap out of him, saw that he had a gun. One of the officers disarmed him and pulled the gun away out of the holster and walked away with it, and then they shot him 12 times. Do you carry a gun regularly?
No.
Okay. Well, that's our Second Amendment right, last I checked.
Yeah.
Yeah, so are you going to argue against the Second Amendment and say that anyone carrying a gun should be shot and executed in the street?
No, but I have common sense enough not to approach armed police officers.
He wasn't approaching. He was standing on the sidewalk and filming.
And getting a camera in their face and pissing them off.
He was holding a camera.
That dude is insane.
Okay, well then in that case, is it the right of the U.S. government to execute anyone who's filming them?
Hey, if you're pissing off and scaring cops like that
With the camera?
with
How are
the
you
camera
scaring them?
And then the gun.
No,
I can
he
see
didn't.
that.
He didn't show the gun. He
Those
was standing
cops
there
are
with a
beating
camera.
the shit out of him, and
Yeah.
that's rage because they were afraid.
Yeah.
He did something that scared the shit out
Watch
of
the
them.
full video, no commentary. Watch the video. He's standing there. He tries to help the woman. They grab him, push him to the ground, start beating the crap out of him. His shirt goes up. They see that he has a holstered gun on his back. They take the gun and then shoot him 12 times.
Okay.
That is a legal U.S. citizen right there being executed in plain sight.
And this relates to immigration crackdown. It's just crazy.
Because it was
how,
ICE officers who killed him.
How like Border Patrol was like nothing, and then Trump got elected, and then it's like Border Patrol is the Gestapo.
Remember how I said that the plan inside of Project 2025 was to replace the intelligence agency with people loyal to Trump and not loyal to the Constitution? They did the same thing with ICE. They funded ICE and are seeking them on the U.S. population.
Dang.
It was outlined in Project 2025. I recommend you read it from the Heritage Foundation. Multiple people who wrote the Project 2025 are now serving in his cabinet right now. They are the heads. Pete Hegseth was recruited through the Heritage Project and Project 2025. They were trying to recruit me.
So Donald Trump is phenomenally good at scaring liberals.
No, he's not. He's an absolute dumbass.
Well, he's phenomenally good at scaring liberals.
No. Here's the ingenious part of why the Heritage Foundation chose Donald Trump. Are you familiar with the story of the emperor has no clothes?
Yeah.
Okay. The emperor has no clothes, so anyone who's loyal to the emperor says that he has good clothes, when in reality he's running around naked. As part of Project 2025, the reason why Donald Trump is the ultimate authoritarian dictator, in their opinion, is because he's a dumbass. He's so much of a stupid dumbass that isn't able to comprehend basic things that's going on around him and has no concept of how the world works or how the economy works or anything like that. But anyone who proves their loyalty to the Project 2025 agenda says that he's a genius. He's the smartest man on the planet. That's why he's such a good dictator. It's because just by saying, hey, he's kind of dumb, you immediately filter yourself out of the selection process for who's going to be qualified to serve in the regime. The emperor has no intelligence, and anyone who says so is put on the chopping block. If you say, why is he falling asleep? You watch the most recent congressional stuff where they start questioning Marco Rubio about Donald Trump falling asleep inside of the Oval Office. And he's like, I've never seen Donald Trump falling asleep in the Oval Office while he's on the job. He's of absolute mental acuity. They show him a video of Marco Rubio standing next to him as Donald Trump slouches down and falls asleep in his chair. And he's like, I never saw him falling asleep. Well, you see him falling asleep right now on the video. Is he falling asleep there? I'm not going to comment on that. The emperor has no intelligence. And if you say so, you are put on the chopping block. Donald Trump doesn't scare me. I'm not scared of a weak, pathetic, elderly man. I'm scared of the systems that are built around him, that people are willing to sacrifice life and limb in the agenda to destroy this nation and drive it into authoritarianism. That's what I'm scared of. right? We swore an oath to uphold and protect the Constitution from all threats, foreign and domestic. You and I both swore that same oath. And here I am explaining to you that a foundational law, the right of due process, which is enshrined in our Constitution, but not just our Constitution, it goes back to the year 1215, so foundational in our law, and you are arguing against it. You are arguing against the oath that you took. You are sacrificing the oath that you took as part of joining the U.S. Armed Services because of your loyalty to an agenda. How do you think that makes me feel listening to my neighbors, my fellow veterans, my fellow men and my fellow countrymen sacrifice the very foundation of our nation in order to prove loyalty to an idiot?
Don't you think he's funny, though?
I don't find him funny anymore.
I think he's hilarious.
When it came...
I think he's really funny, folks. Real funny.
Oh, absolutely. That's what Romney said. He was heavily... Have you ever read the book by Mitt Romney, A Reckoning?
No.
It was a biography written. What happened is the gentleman who wrote it was a professional biographer. This was after Romney voted to impeach Donald Trump and went against the rest of the Republican Party. He recognized that his political career was dead, so he just decided to give all of his notes from the beginning of his political career to the end to the biographer and say, have fun. Here's what happened. Donald Trump was heavily involved in the Romney campaign back in 2007-08. He was a trusted confidant. Romney said that he was hilarious, one of the funniest men he has ever met, and he loved having Donald Trump around. But when he went into Nancy Reagan to ask for her endorsement, she said under one condition: keep Donald Trump out of your campaign. This man is going to ruin our nation. Romney didn't understand. He got the endorsement, and he started distancing from Donald Trump, but he never actually quit it. It wasn't until the election night that he recognized the true insidious power of Donald Trump. After Romney lost, Donald Trump started claiming the election was stolen in 2008. The election was rigged. The election was rigged. The election was stolen. We all need to be up in arms against the Democrats who's stealing our nation. No.
That's so unfair to me.
It's this exact same lie. Yes, he might be funny, but I don't find him funny anymore. It's claiming that Hitler was funny or Goebbels was funny. They probably had really good senses of humor, but I don't care. The bloodshed that they left in their wake, I think, outweighs any sense of humor that I might actually have regarding their jokes. Gonna be honest.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah, like Donald Trump, he was an entertaining reality TV show host, but not the... Sorry, I'm getting a little frustrated. I'm going to have to get done soon.
Is there anything that he does that you like?
Multiple, actually. Let's see here. I'm sorry. Right now I have, because I've been talking negatively for a couple of, almost an hour now, I have a strong negativity bias. I try to recognize the positivity that he's at least brought forward. Let's see here. He's been pharmacies are considered a natural monopoly. He's been working on Trump RX to solve that. I don't like that he slapped his name on it. That's authoritarian as shit. But he's working on it. That's good. We can use that in the future and expand upon it to build a better opportunity. That's not the goal, though. He wants to slap his name on something, brand it. His family gets the check because Trump is sure enough a trademarked logo, trademark name, and he gets made millions of dollars. The new Trump Airport, Trump International Airport in Miami, they get millions of dollars. His family, his company gets millions of dollars for them using their trademark and selling merch in it. That's a conflict of interest, if I've ever heard one. That breaks multiple clauses in the Constitution. It's really bad. But there's one thing off the top of my head. If I looked around and tried to think harder, I probably could. However, right now, you have been smoking very concentrated marijuana, and I feel it settling in. I want to call it quits while I'm still safe to drive.
Okay, no worries. Well, we've been at 2.5 hours, so.
I had a very good time, Mike.
Yeah.
Hopefully I didn't get too worked up.
No, you're fine. This is great.
I'm glad.
I loved it.
I'm glad.
Then, before, 2 questions. Book suggestions and where can people find you?
Book suggestions. So where can people find me? I'm everywhere around town. Go to some sort of protest or...
Not like website, social media.
I'm on Nextdoor. I'm on social media on Nextdoor. I'm also on Facebook. I'm trying to get started on Instagram and TikTok. You'll be hearing more about me or more from me over the next couple of years. Right now, I'm just trying to keep a relatively low profile. I'm so burnt out from the campaign over my 2 campaigns last year that I don't want to be bothered. I kind of mentioned it to you before. Because I knew that I was going to lose the Spokane Valley City Council race because I wasn't in the voter pamphlet. Drama behind that with my campaign team. Don't worry about it. I knew I was going to lose, so my goal was actually to make sure Merkel's pundit lost and Laura Patton won. She's a strong MAGA conservative. But most of my...
maggot conservative.
Yeah, but most of my friends are actually MAGA conservatives. Believe it or not. A lot of my friends are MAGA conservatives.
Well, it's hard here and hard not to in Spokane Valley.
But there's a difference between MAGA conservatives and maggots. Maggots support genocide. MAGA conservatives are... Remember the difference between incompetence and malice?
Yeah.
I call them the malicious ones maggots because they know what they're doing is wrong and they do it anyway. In my long conversations with Laura Patton, she seems like a genuinely good person. She's sticking to city council. She's sticking to the issues that matter to us citizens. She's working on better jobs and supply chains here. She's been working on better police and security. And I believe it or not, despite what I said earlier, I do support public safety. I do support our police. I do support our local jobs and our local economy. The 3 things that I ran on were the 3 things. What I did was I talked to constituents, almost over 1,000 people in Spokane Valley, and I asked them the 3 things that that mattered to them the most. They said housing crisis or cost of living. They said jobs, better paying jobs, roads, and public safety. Those were the top 4. I rolled roads into like quality of life, and Laura Patton, sure enough, I just gave her a lot of my data that I did, and she ran on the same 3 issues. We're very similar. I really like her. She's not, she obviously isn't progressive. She's not going to be running as a Democrat, and there's a lot of things that I disagree with her on, but I've never seen any malice come from her. Merkel, on the other hand, yeah, he knows what he's doing. He directly told me, I'm not MAGA. I just use them. I just act like them. Oh, yeah, they're easy. He doesn't, a quote that I have from him, because I interviewed him on the record, was, there should be no checks and balances on elected officials, and the Constitution's just a piece of paper that can be thrown away at any time. Right? Like, that is, as a veteran who took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, I was like, wow, buddy. Wow, that's insane. You are an insane man. I can send you that recording if you want. It's like a 16-minute
I hear
recording.
he's really good at pissing people off.
Yeah, just like Trump. He's a local Trump who's able to get news because he tries to be funny and he tries to rage bait people. But quite frankly, he's a pathetic, weak little man. You look at him. He's just weak-minded. He's weak-souled. He doesn't stand for anything. He'll do what he told me the reason why he ran originally was because the city council was persecuting him for having cars in front of his home, and they were saying that they were trying to label his house a nuisance property. So now he tries to advocate to end end accountability for our government officials and make it so that there's no checks and balances on government officials so that he can be the one persecuting others. He doesn't stand for anything. That's a weak man. A real man stands for something. A real man cares about something. We aren't just grass blowing in the wind in order to achieve power. Real men say, no, this is where I stand. You can stand with me or you can stand away from me, but I'm staying right here. And he hasn't done that for anything. He just does whatever he wants in order to make more money and make more power. And I don't respect that. I don't see that.
He's getting sued by the city.
Yeah, but that's also giving him free publicity. And then he can claim persecution.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a insidious way. So it's called you've probably heard of it before, the false flag event, where you create a problem and then offer yourself as the only solution to a problem. He created a problem by illegally posting on Nextdoor, acting on official city business without maintaining any public records. But then he claims persecution because he wasn't following the rule. Now, I do care that the other city council members weren't following those same rules. There are a couple of people that I know that filed for public records requests for the other council members who still haven't had those requests fulfilled. I don't overlook that. I'm not a hypocrite. But Al Merkel is doing it maliciously. And I know that he is because he's getting a lot of publicity on it and he relishes in it. He's undermining our city for his own personal gain and power, building distrust among our community members for his own personal gain and power. I'm not trying to divide our city. I love Spokane Valley. I love the people here. Most of my friends, as you can imagine, of someone who has more friends over the age of 75 than under, most of my friends are conservative, deep red Republicans. And I love them dearly. Most of the veterans inside of the Disabled American Veterans, deep red MAGA Republicans. I'm still friends with them, and I help them daily. This false divide that Democrats are the evil or Republicans are evil is a lie meant to keep us at each other's throats. Mm-hmm. The real threat is the malicious people on the furthest extremes trying to get us to kill each other so that they could take power. And I don't like that. That's why I'm standing firmly where I am. If I'm wrong, I'm going to admit that I'm wrong and try to stand somewhere else. But if you don't provide proof that I'm wrong, you don't meet that burden. Like, as you can tell, I have a high level of intellectual proof that someone needs to meet in order for me to admit that I'm wrong. But I'll readily do it. He doesn't provide that proof. He just says, no, this is what we're doing. That's not governance by consensus. That's not democracy. That's not representative democracy. He's dictating, this is what we're doing. That's a definition of a dictator. Anyway, book recommendations. As I said earlier, Mitt Romney, A Reckoning. Fantastic book. Another one, I'm forgetting the name of it, but it was an excellent economic book. Poor Economics. It was taught inside of my global economic class, and it teaches about poverty and the vital role that USAID and various other organizations play in alleviating global poverty. Because, by the way, it's not just alleviating global poverty, it's building poverty-stricken nations into nations that we could really use for labor. We build them up so that we can put factories in there and then put their people to work in the factories. USAID was not necessarily a completely ethical organization, but they were doing a lot of really good work. And cutting it is going to hurt our economy in the long run because now we don't have factories in those nations being built up. Vietnam, one of our largest trading partners over the last decade, was built up from an adversary to one of our closest trading partners because of our trade relations. So Global Economics or Poor Economics, excellent read. What's another one? Just read up on the Sherman Antitrust Act. Sections 1 and 2. Absolutely amazing. Read the Kilmaro Brego Garcia v. U.S. Government. It's 6 pages roughly, the Supreme Court decision. Not a summary of it, what the judges actually wrote. Excellent reading. I believe it's called like the summary judgment or the explanation. I'm forgetting the exact term, but it's really good. Apologies, I mostly listen to audiobooks and watch like YouTube videos and things like that. Economics Explained, it's a YouTube channel. How Money Works is another excellent YouTube channel. I like them. And then just for generalized curiosity, because I'm a lifelong learner, Smarter Every Day. Strong Christian, strong Republican. But, man, he's like a NASA engineer. He's smart. He's a mechanical engineer that just continuously learns. Let's see. What's another good one? Everything else is blanking in my mind right now.
No worries.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was good, and this was a phenomenal podcast. I hope you guys check out where to find him and leave some questions in the comments below. Be sure to like this video. Remember that sharing is caring. Subscribing is what winners do, but smashing the bell is what legends do. All right, guys, I will see you next episode.
Have a great day, y'all. Thank you, Mike, for inviting me onto the podcast.
Absolutely.
I had a good time.
Absolutely. All right. Bye-bye.
Dynamite Mike. Podcast that you like.